Hello, everybody. Welcome board. It's nice to see number of attendees from software industry. Actually, we have lots of registrants, but limited attendees because of summer. Anyway, nice to see all of you. As you know, today we will talk about road mapping on product management. Let me introduce a brief about QualifiedONE, our company. Greg and I provide consulting services around product management and marketing for software companies. So we help them to improve their internal product management processes and get better results on their marketing activities. Maybe you know, we have a number of webinars on product management previously. We have talked about how to transform from a project company into a product-led business. We have talked about the essentials of product management, the leadership, the strategy, and organizational maturity. And today, as you know, we will talk about the road mapping. If you want to take a look at our previous webinars, you can visit qualifiedone.com/events and our YouTube channel, QualifiedONE.
कौन सा?
एक प्रोडक्ट हेड है जिसको मैं जानता हूँ किस तरह से।
Yeah, we have new attendees. I kindly request you to mute. Thanks a lot. And let me introduce Greg. Greg is a 20 years experienced product management professional, and he shipped products in leading tech companies like IBM, Microsoft, and SAP. And nowadays, he provides product management consulting and coaching. And today, he will tell about the road mapping on product management. So it's your turn, Greg. Thanks a lot. You are muted, Greg.
Thank you. We have billed this as the art of building product roadmaps. We'll talk a little bit about the art, but there's been a ton of discussion on this topic lately on social media, especially LinkedIn. And I wanted to give my 2 cents. I'm doing a lot of work around product road mapping. Last year, I had a really big engagement and created what I call the cookbook for a client and wanted to share my latest thinking and take a slightly different approach. So I want to start with, as we always should, the problem. And first, we have to define stakeholders. And here are a couple of definitions. The second one works for us. It's anybody with an interest in something or an investment. And products have a lot of stakeholders. And we usually think about internal and external stakeholders differently. The nature of the relationship is different. But internally, we've got all the other functions, engineering, sales, marketing. We may have other product groups consuming our product. There's leadership. And then there's a whole slew of external roadmaps. And this list is incomplete. Some of you might have customer success. You might have compliance. There are more stakeholders than we can list. By the way, by that definition, your competitors are a stakeholder. They're interested in your product, right? They want it to fail. But they, in a strange way, are competitors, especially for your roadmap. That's how I came to that conclusion. I was thinking about who really wants to see your roadmap. And probably more than anybody, it's your competitors, right? The idea here is that this list is incomplete. It could go on forever. It's impossible to manage all these actively. So we really have to prioritize, but all of them share some issues that a product manager has to deal with. So some of your stakeholders see the product as incomplete. There are things they would like to see in it. That could be leadership, customers, prospects. They want new features and functions and all that kind of stuff. A lot of stakeholders have to prepare. When you come out with a new version, it's not as easy as just, users logging on and seeing a completely different experience. They may have to prepare their infrastructure. They may have to migrate data. There's a lot that they may need to do. And they're always looking to the future. And especially to customers, one of their problems is, wow, I am making a big investment in this product. This is kind of a B2B thought, by the way, but I'm making this big investment. Are these people serious about this product? Are they committed to it? Or am I going to be left hanging at some point? And these are the kind of questions based on some of the key stakeholders that we can imagine. You know, customers want to know, well, I need to train people. Will it stay competitive? Engineering wants to know, is what we're planning feasible? Am I going to have to change the architecture? UX has questions. Sales has a lot of questions. Is this product strategic? Can I position it with prospects confidently? Are there innovations that I can talk about? What's the differentiation? Leadership has their own set of questions. And this is just a subset of stakeholders. And we have to ask ourselves, how can we help them solve these problems? If they have these challenges, what can we do? And how can we do that efficiently? Because there are a lot of them. And a big part of the answer is product roadmaps. If we build a great product roadmap, we allow our stakeholders to see where we're going, to align themselves. They see commitment in the product. These artifacts are super important for those reasons. If you want happy stakeholders, roadmaps are interesting or even critical. And here's a definition. I call it a compound artifact. We'll go into that. It's really a communication vehicle, and it is about delivering value to the market. Roadmaps are about delivery. You can talk about your vision and your strategy and all these other great things, your innovation, but when do I get value? When are you going to deliver stuff with me? And in terms of this definition, the market is basically everybody who buys a category of a product. And I think the high order bit here is that they are value oriented. These things in one way or another communicate our intent to deliver value. So they are a statement of intent. That's another way to think of them. And I said it's a compound artifact because I believe roadmaps have two key elements. One is the representation, and that's what we're used to seeing, a list, some milestones, a Gantt chart. And there's also business context. And that's the minimum set of information I need to understand the why behind the roadmap. Why did you select this value? Who is it intended to serve? Why did you pick this timing? So the diagram or the representation by itself is not enough. And all types of roadmaps have things on them, expressions of value that we plan to deliver. I just call those generically roadmap items. And I use that term because they're not parallel. Sometimes they are features or feature areas or broad capabilities or integration of some technology or all kinds of things. Roadmaps have to tell a story. So roadmap items are not, all the same type. And if I have a milestone roadmap, if I'm thinking about its anatomy, I have milestones, I can have themes for those milestones that can be really valuable in terms of communication. And as I said before, all roadmaps should have some indication of timing or at least sequencing. You get this, then you'll get this, then you'll get this. It is helpful to think about what a roadmap is not. It sits at the intersection of a lot of processes, has a lot of critical data, so it's easy to get confused about its purpose. So as I said before, it's not just a diagram, that's not enough. I have to have some context. By the way, including descriptions of the roadmap items. What are those things? Beyond just a simple word or phrase. A roadmap is not a plan, and I hear people call it a plan all the time. Plans include resources, dependencies, activities, dates. Roadmap is about value, not about activities. So to make a roadmap executable, you still need a plan. You need to figure out who is going to do what when. Roadmaps should not be seen as a firm commitment. We should at least not position them that way. They are a statement of intent. We're telling our stakeholders, right now, this is what I intend. Guess what? I work in a volatile market. crazy things are happening in the world. This could change. And finally, they are not a strategy. I call them an expression of strategy. And we'll go a little bit into this, but the order of operations is to create a strategy and then create a roadmap that helps me execute that strategy. So they're companion artifacts. Strategy tells me how I plan to achieve success. The roadmap tells me ideally how I'm going to deliver value to the market based on that strategy. So we shouldn't confuse these things. And the way we position roadmaps can help set the right expectation or the wrong expectation. And this is the key message in all the dialogue that I'm seeing around these things. I see a lot of people talking about kind of their philosophy of product management. Roadmaps are not about you, at least not just about you. They need to serve your stakeholders. In that way, they're like a product. Stakeholders have pain. Part of the solution to their pain is to tell them what I intend to do. So when we build a roadmap, when we think about roadmaps, we should put stakeholders first. They're valuable to us for sure, but we need to think about who is going to consume this information. And how important your roadmap is to stakeholders depends on a lot of things. Some stakeholders are highly interested, some are just casually interested. It depends on how critical is your software to their business. I worked at SAP. They run some of the biggest corporations in the world. Roadmaps are important to them. How much of an investment financially do they have in this thing? What is the magnitude of the changes coming? If it's just a bunch of bug fixes, they may not be that interested. But if there are new features coming, there's a good chance most stakeholders want to know about it. And we talked about this idea of trust or feeling, commitment from the company, from the vendor to continue this product. I worked primarily in B2B. That was always important. If you didn't publish a roadmap, that sent a message to the market, and it can be deadly. They can say, these guys are not serious about this product. They don't know what they're going to do with it. I think I will start looking for something a little more stable. And this was a big insight to me. It took me a while to really internalize it. People look at roadmaps very differently. And one of the key differences is whether you serve consumers or other businesses. And this is a generalization, but this is what I've seen. In B2C, roadmaps are inward facing. It's a way to align the team. And there are a ton of consumer products that have no public roadmap. I haven't looked it up recently, but Facebook probably doesn't have a roadmap. ChatGPT may not have a public roadmap, but you can bet internally they know what they plan to deliver. In B2B, it's different. I have a lot of external stakeholders who have made a big investment. It could be a very complex solution to complex problems. And I think this outward facing thought of a roadmap is way more important to B2B. That was certainly my experience. My customers wanted to know where I was going, what I was doing. And part of that is because products are never done, really. There's always more stuff we could do. And they need to know about that for all the reasons we talked about before when we were talking about the problems. So in B2C, they tend to be inward facing. They may even have like task duration information, like a Gantt chart. That's something B2B customers don't care about. They want to know when things will be available. By the way, it doesn't so much matter about the delivery model, whether you're SaaS or whether you're on-prem. They still want to know what's coming. They still may want releases. They still need to know what's going on. And by the way, just because you can continually deliver features doesn't mean you should. And in some cases, it's a really bad idea. So if your software is running my accounts receivable, I don't want a bunch of innovation and stuff. I want it to run like clockwork, like a Swiss train. That's what I'm looking for. So this is a big difference, and it will color the way you think about roadmaps. So in a lot of the dialogue, I have found myself talking past people. They don't understand. B2C people will make all these broad statements like, you shouldn't do roadmaps, you shouldn't put dates on them, you shouldn't do this, you shouldn't do that. And what I say is that you may not have powerful stakeholders demanding details. May not be your biggest problem. Good for you. You should realize that some people have those stakeholders. They need to know. There are millions of dollars or more at play, and they need to know. So we have to be aware of each other. We have to have a little empathy. What your stakeholders need may be radically different from what my stakeholders need. So the roadmap will play a different role. Yeah, I don't know if you've ever heard this tape. I should have left that out, but there's a great tape. You should look it up of Christian Bale saying, "Good for you." Let's talk about these roadmap representations, what most people think of as a roadmap. One of the most common types, this is what I used in my career in the B2B world, milestone-oriented roadmaps. You can see timing across the bottom. There are themes at the top. This is for a surveillance solution. And I list the value, an expression of the value that I plan to deliver. And most of these are feature-like, high level, but it tells you like SaaS command and control. That's not so much a feature as a new delivery model. The other things like RF radio frequency detection, integrated operations manuals, those are like features. But I could have all kinds of stuff in here, compliance to some standard, whatever it is. So we have the roadmap items on here, and they're not necessarily parallel. And I have always done this. One of the vendors gave it a name. Now, next, later, I think is what they're calling it. So on the roadmap, the further I go out, the less confidence I have. And in my case, I could give some indication of what I plan to do in the next couple of turns of the crank. The last milestone I just left as future. And I'm not going to lie, I filled that thing with buzzwords and all kinds of stuff. And I would tell, customers and stakeholders, you will help us prioritize these things. But it's a great way to tell them, hey, we are thinking about some bold things. We have some other things to take care of first, but in the future, you can expect camera self-calibration. It's something we're thinking about. We know it's important. So that can send great messages. It's a great way to acknowledge the need of a stakeholder without committing to delivery or without giving them too much of an indication of when you'll do it. This is what I see most roadmaps, being expressed as today. Most of the tools for product managers create roadmaps in this format. It's the default format. It's a Gantt chart. So again, you see the roadmap items. This shows the duration, how long I plan to spend developing them. I think that's nice information internally. I would not share this with external stakeholders so much. I don't want them to know how long it's going to take me, because maybe a hugely valuable feature that I'm going to monetize for itself is only going to be a week of development. I want to get them focused on value, not how long or my cost of developing things. And sure enough, a lot of stakeholders just don't care. They want to see milestones. They want to know when it gets delivered. And yeah, these things, as I said, tend to be inward facing for the reasons that I enumerated. There are other formats, like I've tried to build roadmaps with mind maps. I love mind maps. So you can imagine like different branches for different areas of the product and then different colors depending on the release. And I haven't built one completely out. I'm still working on that, but it seems very cool to me. So you could really see the evolution of the product across, like the admin experience, end user experience, this, that. You would see through color coding how it's growing over time. May not be the most consumable way always to look at that information, but the idea is we need a representation that has an expression of the value and gives me some indication of the timing. So that's the first element. The second element is business context. So I would have the representation, maybe on the first slide, you can imagine you're going to present this to leadership. And this is the kind of information that I would want to share to give context, to explain why I chose that value, to kind of give some insight into the timing, some of the key drivers. So I might want to share the objectives, the strategy that the roadmap reflects. I might want to share a representation of my business model, like with a canvas. Assumptions are very important. One of the assumptions underlying this roadmap in terms of capacity, economic conditions, all those kinds of things. What's a summary of the market? What are the segments I'm going to serve? you get the idea. The diagram is not enough. It communicates a lot of information. People need some context. So that's how we should think about roadmaps. Not just a pretty picture. There's a bunch of information that helps stakeholders understand that picture. Roadmaps and strategy. This is important. I had a long exchange with somebody on LinkedIn about this. We should first define what a strategy is. It is a course of action that leads to success. That means I have to define success first. Then my strategy is my position about how I'm going to achieve that. And for a given definition of success, I may approach that a bunch of different ways. If I want to increase margin, I may choose to increase revenue and hold costs constant. I may want to decrease costs. I may want to do both. That's just a very simple example of what a strategy would address. It would say, we are going to increase margin, and we're going to do that by increasing our prices. That is a position. And it excludes other positions. It says, I'm not going to focus on lowering costs. I'm going to increase my prices. This is the kind of thing, I have a definition of success, and then I have a strategy. And I can capture that strategy in an elevator pitch. So we can make these slides available. You can look at this, but the ends that I want to achieve are my vision, goals, and objective. Goals are general, objectives are time-bound and measurable. And then I need to describe, as I said, how I plan to achieve those things. These things should be documented, agreed upon, validated before I build a roadmap. Because if the things I'm delivering to the market don't support my ends, don't support my strategy, why am I doing them? So really critical. Before you can have a meaningful strategy, I would say roadmap, you need a meaningful strategy. Does that mean every roadmap has an underlying strategy? No way. I almost never see it. Very few organizations have something I would call a strategy, at least not an explicit one. And I've heard people say, well, you can look at a roadmap and infer strategy from it. I don't believe that. I think the best you can do is infer some priorities. But very few roadmaps have an underlying strategy, and that's a big problem. As a product manager, that is something you should be thinking deeply about. And in your organization, you should enforce this. And if you're smart, we'll talk about validating roadmaps. You should get stakeholders bought off on what you consider success and how you plan to achieve it. Then you just show them the roadmap and say, look, this is the value we're going to deliver to meet those goals and to execute that strategy. It's much easier than trying to do it all at once and leaving these things implicit. And, I would recommend very strongly, by the way, aligning this business motivation. Business motivation is a term for the ends and for the means, the strategy, goals, objectives, and those should be aligned with organizational strategy. Because again, if what we're doing isn't going to help the company be successful, why are we doing it? What are we doing? Are we just off in our own silo? That's usually not a good idea. This is just a hierarchy of the concepts. We all want to be successful. First thing we do is define success with goals and objectives. Then we create a strategy. By the way, you can decompose strategy into tactics. Those are just bite-sized pieces of the strategy. Same idea. They communicate how we will achieve goals and objectives. I've been looking at this comment in chat for a while. Yeah, this is a really good question, and I think it's topical. If it's not a commitment, how do you communicate changes? Well, that's where this context comes in. And changes in context may change our definition of success. So I think that's actually a good way to say it. Since our definition of success may change, the way we plan to achieve it may change, which will change our roadmap. And what is more important, keeping a commitment or reacting to changes in our environment? That's a fundamental question. And when I started my career, it was very clear. Being consistent, delivering on what you said was more important than reacting. And we realized that was a mistake. In technology, especially, things are changing all the time. So what we should be optimizing for is, a lack of confidence, for variation. That's what Agile is all about, by the way. Agile says, look, we don't know at the beginning everything we need to do. We're going to learn while we do this. So let's keep things flexible. And I would say the same thing for your roadmap. Your roadmap puts a stake in the ground and says, this is what we intend today. And the implication is, if there's a big change, we will come back to you. But realize, stakeholder, there could be changes that have nothing to do with you. ChatGPT comes out. Huge development in the IT landscape. Wow, now all my competitors are embedding conversational AI. I have to change my plans or I will perish. And you see that, sometimes the value to stakeholders is indirect. It's like they may not care about conversational AI, but if I don't do these things, my product will fail and you will feel pain. Yeah, and I'm just looking at this. Roadmaps are business oriented. Yeah, it's all about value. It's all about an expression of value. And features can be a very nice shorthand for value. It's something people can relate to, and they can infer from that the value that they will get. It's really, for the most part, not that complicated. I can think of products that I use that, even Office, there are things they need to do. And if they just tell me that they're going to do them, I relax a little bit. So something to take into account. And guys, feel free to keep adding comments. We'll have a Q&A at the end. If I don't take too long, I'm trying to get through this reasonably fast.
Yes, we can make open session in the end of the webinar, Greg, and we can make Q&A.
Cool. So this is one example of how you can tie your motivation, goals, and objectives strategy to your roadmap. And I never see this done. I worked with a client last year. This was the intent. That engagement ended. I need to follow up with them and see if they're doing it. But above, you can see a list of goals. And then you see a bunch of stuff I plan to deliver. Here's a radical idea. Why don't we map those? So when a stakeholder looks at this, at least an internal stakeholder, they know why I'm investing in these things. The things that are in green are things I'm doing to reduce total cost of ownership. The things in this odd orangish color, whatever it's called, integrating the ops manual and so forth, is to comply with regulations that have come out. And you'll notice that some things aren't color-coded, and that is because not everything on our roadmap is strategic. Some things we just need to do. Our competitors did them. It's just expected for completeness, whatever it is. It's not really advancing our strategy. They're just stuff. It's just stuff I need to do. And that's another insight I can take away from this type of representation. How much of what I'm doing is strategic, is really designed to help me achieve a goal. And if there are just one or two things that I can align to my motivation, I have some answering to do. That may be the right thing. But in general, if I can't map what I'm doing to my definition of success, to the way I plan to achieve it, something is broken. I cannot count on these things helping me be successful. And since this is bread and butter for most product groups, that's an issue. I'm building all this stuff, I'm delivering it, which we all know is a nightmare, and I'm not even moving goals forward. It would be interesting if the people on the call can, indicate somehow, raise your hand, if you could show me a roadmap like this today. If you can't, you have an opportunity to do something strategic and important. And that is map your roadmap to your goals or to your strategic pillars, to your tactics, whatever it is. Don't make the stakeholder figure this out for themselves. Show them. How do we create a product roadmap? That is a knowledge worker intensive process. Every organization has a different way of doing it. So the way I've approached that is to define some very general kind of phases. This is oversimplified, helps you get your head around it, helps you avoid common mistakes. But as a knowledge worker, you're going to adapt this. You may be doing some of these concurrently. There may be some that you choose to skip, but that should be a decision. And a few key points I would say is before you start doing anything that's, non-trivial, do some planning. When do we plan to have the roadmap ready? What are the drivers? Do we have an executive review? Is there a customer event? Who's the team? Can I reach out to stakeholders and already tell them, hey, in 2 months, I'm going to need you to validate the roadmap. I then need to do some preparation. I need to make sure my strategy is up to date. My market information is up to date. I need to understand what other products are doing, on and on and on. Then you will just naturally move into a phase where the primary job is to build the roadmap, construction. And that's an iterative process. You need to understand, engineering capacity and priorities and a million other things. So you build your roadmap. Then there comes a phase where you're not spending as much time updating the roadmap. You're trying to get ideally explicit validation from your stakeholders so that they can say, as of today, this expresses our intent, and I think it will make us successful. I believe in this thing, and I think that should be explicit for your most important stakeholders. Email, whatever it is that says, okay, thanks for sharing that, I'm on board. Something else I suggest as part of validation is capturing a confidence level. So 0 to 100, how confident are you that we will, be successful with this roadmap? If we do this, will we be successful? I did this with this client, and sales was at like 50% on some of the products. Imagine that. If we hadn't asked that question. Roadmap sales, they're busy. They would have said, okay, sounds good. You may never get that feedback that, okay, if you want to do it, but I don't think this is what we should be doing. This does not reflect my priorities. There's a very short phase where you're publishing and presenting the roadmap. I threw this last one in. There's always some kind of follow-up after you present it and so forth. But the idea is, this is an important activity. You should strive to have some consistency across the organization. And you should think about it like a process. What are the inputs? What's the output? Who's involved? Roadmaps are that important. They deserve a little planning, preparation, and consistency. The guidance I would give you is especially important stakeholders. Involve them early. Sometimes we overlook, like go to market. We publish our roadmap to them and we say, here, sales, this is what we're going to do. Big mistake. Pull them in and say, this is our definition of success. How do you think we can achieve that? At the beginning, I have a template. We can make that available called a lean plan, where you just capture the most important elements of building the roadmap. This isn't the roadmap itself. This is the process to put the roadmap together. And I talked about explicit validation. I think that's really, really important. Revisiting this idea of stakeholders and roadmaps. I guess that is the key message to this presentation. Roadmaps are not about you. You have stakeholders. They have needs. Understand those needs and deliver roadmaps that are meaningful to them. And there's a huge variety. Engineering wants to know stuff that's different from marketing, which is different from prospects, which is different from the government. And yeah, the government is a stakeholder. We're probably starting to forget now, but a few years ago, Volkswagen forgot that a government is an important stakeholder. They thought they could, pull a fast one. It did not work out. Caused massive disruptions. So think about this wide variety of people. And with that wide variety of people, are you going to have the same conversations with them? No way. The way you talk to customers is different than the way you talk to engineering. So in a mature organization, one of the things that I look for is roadmap versions. Because it's going to be very hard for one message to be generalized and meaningful to all these different people. So in my career, I had a kind of primary roadmap. And from there was a version I would show leadership. There's a version I would show my best customers, a version that might get published in, whatever, on the site. There was a different version we did for industry analysts. When Gartner came, we created a different version of the roadmap that communicated the messages we wanted them to hear. So that is something you should be thinking about in your organization. Do we have versions of the roadmap, and why not? Might be the right answer. I think in general, you're going to tend to have versions. They should all be based on, one kind of version of truth. I've had some interesting conversations lately about outcome-based roadmaps. And I thought I would cover that because I guess that's some noise that's being generated. Here's an example. You can see there are milestones, but the items aren't expressions of value. They are kind of more like goals. It's interesting. Some of them are like more like customer goals, like work in your language. Some of them are how many people in the EU are using them, expanding in the EU, compliance. I don't know. I'm really on the fence about these things. This is kind of interesting information. It's a muddle of stuff. And I'm hearing different authors talk about them in different ways. People define outcomes differently. So let me address that very quickly. You'll hear about outputs, outcomes, and I have another element that I use called impact. And it's easiest to understand those with an example. So let's say I have a mobile app, it's only in English, and people in Europe, South America are complaining and saying, we don't want to use, we want it in our native languages. So what I can say is, all right, I am going to translate it to 5 languages. That is an output. I can generate those 5 languages, I can count it, I can confirm it. But just because I do that doesn't mean it's going to have the impact I hope. Doesn't mean I'll sell more or get more usage or have happier customers. That's what an outcome is. An outcome is the impact on your business. And you should make sure that the things that you're investing in, the value you're delivering, will impact your business in the way you want it to. And then there's this third one called impact. And that is following up with customers and making sure that the value you're delivering is helping their business, helping them achieve their goals. That could be at the user level, the company level. I call this out because I don't know if you're reading as much about it. A lot of radical messages like, oh, you should focus on outcomes instead of outputs. Just not true. What I would say is you should not have just output relevant metrics. If you have an output, like creating a bunch of translations, you should say, what should that mean to our business? And ultimately, you should say, what should that mean to our customers? I want to follow up with my customers and I want to make sure they're more productive. Maybe through the product, I can instrument it. And I can see that sure enough, it's taking them less time to do stuff. This translation had the impact that I hoped. So these are, I call them result types. For a given metric, it can produce different types of results. It can be an output, that's fine. Also define some outcomes. If you have an outcome-oriented metric, make sure that has the impact. And overall, we should be striving to make sure that our roadmap is going to deliver outputs that the market wants, that it's going to impact our business the way we expect it to, and that it is impacting our customers the way they expect. It's that simple. They're all relevant. They're all valuable. They just measure different things, different types of results. Yeah, exactly. It's a great question. That is, one of the ways that impact is a bit different. So if we take features as an example of an output, we can count those, we can validate them. For outcomes, I can look at my revenue, my margin, my churn, my daily active users, whatever it is. Typically, I have the data. I just need to analyze it. With impact, for the most part, you are going to have to go talk to your customers. You're going to have to say, can you demonstrate to me that my product is making you more effective? And sometimes that may be subjective. That's cool. If you can get data, it's a lot better. But impact is a special category, and you will have to do some planning to figure out how you are going to assess impact. But all this is about risk management. There's a risk that if I deliver something to the market, it won't impact my business the way I want. There's a risk that at least for a while, my business is booming, but customers are really getting impatient and dissatisfied. I may find out about that too late. They're buying it because they don't have an option, but as soon as they have an option, they'll take it. So measuring impact is really important. I hope, Kiselton, that answered your question. But yeah, you have to go outside. You usually don't have direct control of all that data. You have to go out and gather it. I was going to make a point. I repeated this for a reason that eludes me now. I built these slides last week. But if you think about those things, a lot of those things aren't really that relevant. Hang on, I lost my slides. Aren't that relevant to your customers. And some of them you don't want to share with your customers. Do you want to tell your customers that you have a goal to increase margin? I don't think so. I want them focused on the value I'm delivering, not my margin, not churn. Do you want to let them know you have a churn issue? May not be the best idea. So my take on outcome-based roadmaps is there's not a definitive definition. They're kind of interesting, but I already showed you how you can take a traditional value-oriented roadmap and map it to your goals and objectives. And I think it's just as effective, and we don't need a new artifact. And I think a dangerous message that's coming out is you shouldn't do value-based roadmaps. You should do outcome-based roadmaps. Well, what that means depends on your definition of outcome, by the way. And how many stakeholders this serves is questionable. You would definitely want versions of this thing somehow. And I just see it as like complexity where it's not required. That's my take on it. Feel free to develop your own or ask questions. I'd love to hear what you think. I did an engagement a long time ago for a customer, and there were people with product management titles who we didn't think were product managers. So we had to define what is the minimum set of characteristics you need to be a product manager. That was a fascinating exercise. And there's this Latin phrase, sine qua non, without which there is nothing. So what I would say for roadmaps, this is still kind of in progress, but if your roadmap doesn't express delivery to the market, if there's no information about timing, I don't consider it a roadmap. I think you're confusing the term, overloading the term, instead of enriching it or extending it somehow. Just my position, but I guess over time, this is kind of important. What should we call a roadmap, and what should we avoid calling a roadmap? It can be really confusing, I think. A very quick point is I started coaching a few years ago. And since I'm like to my core, a product manager, that's the only thing I know how to do. I look at everything as a product, but all the things I talked about today, you can do and probably should do for your career. What are your goals? How do you plan to achieve them? And what does the roadmap look like? And this is an example of an artifact that I create for the people I coach. On top are opportunities for development. On the bottom are the positions that I would like. So you can see this person, this is getting dated, but sometime next year they would like to be a team lead. Well, you can then back solve. What do I need to do to prepare myself for that? I probably need to do some leadership training. Maybe I can volunteer as a leader here or there. Maybe I need to start talking to my manager, whatever it is. I need to go to events. I need to network more. The things that I am talking about today are relevant to your career. So you can PM your career. And I've had a lot of success with that with the folks that I'm coaching. If you'd like to talk about that approach, how it applies to you, you can go to Coach PMs. You can track me down on LinkedIn or whatever. I really blabbed a lot, way longer than I expected. So would like to open it for interactive questions. If there are any, don't be shy. Any observation, anything, we have some time, and I would love to fill it with roadmap talk.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Greg, for the valuable presentation. Yes, guys, is there any question? Or would you like to discuss something? Kızıltan, maybe you want to say something, or I said attendee flyer that, what's your name?
Fernando.
Fernando, welcome.
Yes.
Would you like
Hi,
to add
Greg.
something?
Yeah, well, I just sent this question. There's so many. I find it good that you also describe the different goals you may have and organize them in a structure, because that's essential, right? It's the first step. And that's very good, because many times that's not even clear. But it's also the case I've seen in my career that at some particular point, there are many options that seem, at least at the surface, to be equally important. You know, always top priority. I think we've all seen that scenario many times, Greg. but not everything has the same business value. So if I implement them, I will not get the same, say, revenue increase. I'm not going to improve my sales as much as I would like. So all things being equal, then that might be a defining factor. And there's a lot of literature out there, and I was wondering, do you have any experience on, or what techniques would you suggest as the most commonly used to do that kind of business valuation? What's the business value of creating this feature against this other feature?
Yeah, it's a great question, Fernando, and there's a lot to unpack there. And what you made me think of, for example, is that you can even prioritize your goals and objectives. Your leadership may tell you that for this year, margin is where it's at. Guess what? I would present them a roadmap that demonstrates to them how you're going to increase margin. You know, that's really important. And the other observation I would make, I do have some experience with this, and that is, you know, I was in a big organization that tried to build a business case for every feature. And I think it's a mistake. You can't do it. And the example I always give is like, if you're on Facebook, this already ages me. Old people are still on Facebook. At the end of the year, they do like a retrospective of a year. They show you pictures, the most popular posts. What is the impact of that on their business? Who knows? It may increase retention. It may drive ad revenue. There may be some ways to measure it. But the tricky part, Fernando, is that it's very hard to build a business case at the feature level. So really coming up with the value, we have to be careful. And that's why strategy is so important. All things being equal, the things that I can associate with revenue will win over the things that I can't, even though these other things may be more strategic. Maybe the market hasn't started to demand conversational AI, but I know it's coming. So we have to be super careful. We have to have a balanced set of metrics, and we have to think about not is what's going to make me successful today, how am I going to be successful in 3 years? So try to avoid the attempt to build a business case at the feature level. Think about the scenarios you would like to enable, and then build a roadmap that, you know, incrementally enables those scenarios. Sometimes for a scenario, you get a little bit closer to a business case. You know, if we can make, and that's really more of a goal, but if we can make administrators 20% more effective, blah, 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 blah. Now let's look at the investments that we're making to make that happen. And back of the envelope, let's say, hey, if we increase adoption by this much, that should mean this much revenue. We think it's going to cost us this much to build this thing. This sounds like a good idea. I would not treat it like a normal business case and say, wow, our internal rate of return on this feature is going to be 6.8%. Probably you're deluding yourself.
It's interesting. Yes, it's interesting. But also there are many organizations that use that. I don't know where that's coming from, but for whatever reason, at least helps create, or the illusion of creating a narrative that, you know, the revenue will be increased so much, sort of a way to validate why we're taking this decision. But I agree with you. It's kind of focus creative booking, because it's really hard to measure, and, you know, dollar to dollar, the revenue is difficult to say, oh, this dollar can do this feature, this other dollar can do the other feature. Yeah, absolutely.
People buy the whole thing. So you can try to build a model and look at it. You can look at usage of that feature, adoption. But building a business case is tough. And that is one of the reasons, Fernando, why this motivation is so critical. Because in the lack of a specific business case, I can at least have a discussion and say, you know what? Margin or reducing churn is our most important goal. And it's pretty clear this one is going to do more for that than this one. So let's do this one first. You know, it is an imprecise kind of thing, I believe. And there are some organizations that a lot of what's on their roadmap are specific requests from customers. There, it's a little easier to say, wow, if we do this, this is for this project, and this is the associated revenue. But then we get back to our original discussion, which is, wow, just reacting to the customers I have is not going to help me necessarily get new customers. It may not be strategic. So I've got to be careful, and I've got to measure those things.
Thank you, Craig.
I don't know what time it is, but it looks like we're getting close. Anybody else? Anything you'd like to share or add? Any experience?
Greg, the way you pictured seemed like resonating with the mid to higher scale enterprise for me. How would you differentiate the benefits of having a roadmap in a startup, in a very early stage, even perhaps pre prototype or pre MVP? How would it help? And for instance, for investor talks, for among the founders, how would it help? And what are the key differentiators that make it different than the enterprise version?
Yeah, I think the key differentiator is just your level of confidence. Like your intent is much broader and less defined. You can make the argument, and some people say that as a startup, before you find your, product market fit, before you know your business model, you shouldn't build a roadmap. I would say you should not become a slave to your roadmap. But it is impossible in most cases to deliver a mature product in one turn of the crank. So I haven't met an investor yet who doesn't want to know where things are going to go, that wants to see some progression, that says, this is what we're going to deliver. We think this will get us revenue. And look at the other things we can do. Look at the overall potential of this thing. So I think from that perspective, if it's positioned the right way, it's just as important to make it clear to your investors that these are our priorities. We've done our homework. We know what's absolutely critical. And by the way, we have years of work to do. Give us a lot of money, because we're going to keep delivering on this. We've got a lot of stuff we can do. And, I would say the time frame will be shorter. You might have a decent position on what you're going to do in the first release. That should be caveated and say, hey guys, we're still learning. We're not at product market fit, so this could change. But we have thought about this. We're not just out there cranking out features. I just read a LinkedIn post last week that said, or maybe this week, startups should be feature factories. And I'm like, what? Organizations that have extremely constrained funds and, highly involved investors should just build a bunch of stuff? I don't think so. I think you better go to investors with a clear definition of success, a compelling strategy to reach it, and you should demonstrate to them that you have a plan for delivering that, a credible plan. So it's going to be more high level. It's probably going to be shorter term. This future bucket might be important to get them really kind of inspired about the idea and its eventual potential. But I could make the argument, in a lot of cases, it's every bit as important, just for kind of different reasons. And I guess, given the theme of this presentation, the key the key stakeholder there is going to be investors. Your roadmap better resonate with your investors. And I just talked to a startup yesterday. He was like, I haven't gotten any, I haven't been selected in any of these pitch things and blah, blah, blah. And it's because, he thinks it's going to take 10 years to become highly profitable. Hello. Yeah. That's good. That's a tough sell. That is a tough sell. Does that make sense? Because then does that just sound like a rationalization? I don't know.
Yeah, I think it makes sense because at least I think particular for the in the prototyping stage, like early stage startups, it's all about the idea, right? Still, you are ideating. Prototyping is also a foundation of or like a tangible extension of the ideation stage. Today we had a serial startup founder talk, and he said that the average pivot before a product market fit is generally 5, and this may extend up to 10 or even go as low as 3, but still it would not be the first idea. Definitely no. So
yeah, so right, yeah. Because then you could easily waste a bunch of time trying to be specific about the future. I wouldn't. I would acknowledge that it's kind of vague, but thinking about how you're going to deliver value beyond the first version isn't crazy. and we're thinking about it anyway. Why not put something down? The important thing is to not become a slave to that thing. And if you're the type of person that once it's written down, you can't deviate from it, don't do a roadmap. But if you're pardon me, but if you're like a rational adult, you can write some things down with that understanding by everybody. Hey, this could change. This could change radically.
Yeah, yeah.
But you know what? Not every pivot radically changes the roadmap. You may be addressing just a different segment. You may be including something different. So, right, there are different types of pivots as well. It's not always just, go back to a blank slate. As a matter of fact, I would say normally it's not.
Yeah, it shouldn't, at least.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, guys, thanks so much for the engagement and the questions. There's 1 minute left. Connect with me on LinkedIn if we're not connected. Whoops, I was supposed to take this out, sorry. This is our fall 2023 calendar. This is as far as we've gotten. We're gonna be doing some training starting October 2nd. These are like one-day kind of workshops. They all build on each other. If you're a product leader or a founder, you can take the first one, and then we go through strategy in more detail, road mapping in more detail, and then talk about prioritization. So stay tuned. We'll be announcing pricing and all that kind of stuff, but we would love to see you in October, where we really do a deep dive on some of the things that we've spoken about today. And if you need help with road mapping or pretty much anything else product, we'd be happy to talk.
Thanks a lot, Greg.
Thanks. Yeah.
Thanks you to Kızıltan and Fernando for the contributions. Any questions from others, or we can close?
I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing your name right, but Lala, thanks for coming again. She was here.
Yeah. Hi, Greg.
Hello.
Hello.
So nice to see you again.
Yeah.
And I'm glad I made it through the presentation.
Yeah, you too. You are okay, right?
Yes, I survived.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks so much, everybody. See you on LinkedIn and elsewhere, I hope.
Bye all.
Bye, everybody.